welcome to the Earth Feels podcast.
I'm Rose.
And I'm Christine.
Welcome to Earth Feels, the podcast for people feeling overwhelmed by the endlessly gloomy climate news.
Where every week we have soul-based conversations about climate change and explore the idea that climate change may be happening for us as much as it is happening to us.
If you are ready to shift your focus and secure the future for our kids and our grandkids, then this is the podcast for you.
And yes, we do know how to spell.
Hello, this is Rose here, and this week I'm on my own, just like Christine was on her own last week. Christine this week is out at Kripalu, a health and wellness retreat area in the Berkshires in Massachusetts. And luckily for me, I live in Massachusetts, so I will be seeing her as the week progresses. But for now, instead of talking to myself, I am going to be reading a few essays to you that have struck me at the heart. And I'm entitling this podcast, Does Spirituality Matter in Addressing Climate Change? For me, that is a big issue. As I've been walking farther along my spiritual path, I have become more and more of a climate activist. And there are a couple of essays that I feel really address the heart of the matter. The first being by a woman whose name is Anita Sanchez. Anita is an Indigenous and Latina author, a PhD. She's a trainer and a speaker and is passionate about visionary leadership, Indigenous wisdom, and the empowerment of women. And I came across an article that she had written a while ago in 2017, and I just felt like it really addressed where we are in the scheme of things right now. And the name of the article is Why Climate Change is a Spiritual Issue. So bear with me as I read this. Somewhere along the way, many of us have bought into the lie of separation. We've swallowed the idea that we are just individual bags of flesh and bone whose purpose it is to consume. Rather than seeing ourselves as part of the earth and intrinsically connected to her seasons, cycles, and rhythms, this, quote, I am separate, unquote, mindset leads us to behave toward the natural world as if we are not connected to it, as if it is something to own, to use, and dominate, resulting in unlimited resource extraction, pollution of our environment, degradation of our food and water, climate change, the extinction of species, and more. It is a mindset that has allowed everything from slavery to colonization, capitalism, and environmental destruction to flourish. What happens as we continue to operate out of this belief of isolation? We create and feed conditions that foster hopelessness, division, and even cruelty and terrorism. For example, we fall prey to xenophobia, the fear of others, perhaps a fear of homeless people in our community. I have found myself looking away from the homeless at times in my life, rather than seeing another human being. We are the ones to stop it being routine to turn our eyes away, even pretend that they don't exist, rather than acknowledge their presence with a compassionate smile and hello. It is time to wake up and end the destructive illusion that we are not connected to this planet or to each other. We are hurting ourselves. We are hurting nature and the earth, and we are hurting the spirit that nourishes our world and us. Thankfully, there is another way to live. As Tom Goldtooth of the 2016 Dakota Pipeline Movement said in a Washington Post article, quote, capitalism feeds on unlimited growth. It's like this monster that's always hungry and thirsty and devouring the earth. We have to live in balance. Otherwise, we're going to perish. End quote. The first step is to own the situation at both the micro as well as the macro level, because the way we treat our world reflects the way we treat ourselves. And it's easy to point the finger. We are quick to blame evil multinationals, greedy politicians, and powerful media interests. We blame the oil and gas industry, the fossil fuel industry, the sugar, tobacco, and pharmaceutical corporations, the banks, the white-collar criminals, the organized crime syndicates, and more. These entities could not exist, though, if we were not complicit in some way. They thrive in an environment of fear, division, despair, lethargy, and judgment. We cannot love, respect, and honor the earth if we don't love and honor ourselves. When we poison our own bodies with junk food, cigarettes, alcohol, and drugs, we do so to drown out the emotional and spiritual pain of feeling powerless and disconnected. When we pollute our minds with fear-based news, tabloid gossip, online gambling, or porn, objectifying women and children, we are feeding the us and them and the I am separate lie. When we numb ourselves with TV, shopping, social media, and medication, we are gagging our spirit. The world is in turmoil, and people wonder what they should do. The problem seems daunting. Indigenous elders say we must change our consciousness now by shifting from the mind to the heart. Our challenges will not be resolved with logic and reason. Solutions are not found using the same thinking that created the problems. It is our hearts that will guide us. From the nomadic, spiritual, and indigenous perspective, we are part of the circle of energy that flows from the land, through the plants, through the animals, through the rocks, through the wind, and then through to mankind. If a tree is taken out of that natural environment, if the birds and the animals are taken out, they die. The same has happened with nomadic humans. We have been taken out of the natural environment, and we are slowly dying. Colonialism only considered the physical human. They did not think about the mental, sexual, spiritual, or environmental human. The answer, then, is to reconnect. Reconnect with each other and with the cycles of the natural world, including the movement of weather conditions, of plant and animal behavior. Most of all, though, we must reconnect with our true selves. When we honor the spirit that resides within us, this will be reflected in our external world. It starts and ends with love. So that's pretty powerful. Again, it's written by Anita Sanchez, and she wrote it for MomsRising.org back in October of 2017. And if you're not familiar with MomsRising.org, they're a group of women that came together, just a handful, and that handful became hundreds, and the hundreds became thousands. And through friends telling friends, Moms Rising now has more than 1 million members. They believe that every one of us can have an impact and that together we are a powerful force. So they take critical issues facing women, mothers, and families and educate the public and mobilize grassroots action. So if that's something that you're interested in, I highly recommend them. It's called MomsRising.org. And if you've been following the Democratic debates here in the United States of recent days, you might be familiar with Pete Buttigieg, who is one of our Democratic contenders. He's a young, gay pastor, ex-military, Rhodes Scholar, speaks 7 languages. And because of his spiritual background, he has actually addressed the issue spirituality and climate change. And I'd kind of like to leave a quote here from Pete. He's been on the late night talk show circuit, and I think this particular quote he's given a number of different times, but it really speaks to me as well. He says, "You don't have to be religious to see the moral dimensions of climate change, because frankly, every religious and non-religious tradition tells us that we have some responsibility of stewardship some responsibility of taking care of what's around us, not to mention taking care of our neighbor. And I think that's really what it comes down to for me, is the idea that we are stewards. We're supposed to be stewards of the earth. And we were gifted this planet by the Creator, whoever you might think he or she was. And we are here to share our gifts with the planet and not just be taking from the planet. That's my personal take on it. And so to that end, I think it makes perfect sense that our next essay should be from the Dalai Lama, whose entire purpose is to guide us spiritually on this planet. And this is His Holiness's message to delegates to the COP24 UN Climate Conference. So here goes. It's dated from December 5th of 2018. It's a little bit older, but I think it's to the benefit of all of us to review what the Dalai Lama has to say. I would sincerely like to thank all of you who have selflessly and tirelessly put effort into creating a better environment for the world so that future generations will be able to live a healthy, happy life. As someone born in Tibet, the rooftop of the world, where Asia's great rivers rise and the world's highest peaks are to be found, I have loved nature since my childhood. I have made environmental conservation one of my life's commitments and advocate protection of the environment wherever I go. In spite of the huge technological developments that have taken place in our modern world, we have created many problems too. Experts tell us that human beings are responsible for global warming and the change in weather conditions. Logically, this means that we humans have a responsibility to reduce problems that we have caused and to finally eliminate them. Climate change is not the concern of just one or two nations. It is an issue that affects the whole of humanity and every living being on this earth. This beautiful planet is our only home. If, due to global warming or other environmental problems, the earth cannot sustain itself, there is no other planet to which we can move. We have to take serious action now to protect our environment and to find constructive solutions to global warming. When we see photographs of the Earth from space, we see no boundaries between us, just this one blue planet. This is no longer a time to think of my nation or our continent alone. There is a real need for a greater sense of global responsibility based on a sense of the oneness of humanity. I want to thank UNFCCC for consistently working to reduce the negative impact of climate change, and I pray that this conference will be a success. Very powerful words from the spiritual leader of our earth. And so, in answer to today's question, does spirituality matter in addressing climate change? I'm hopeful that you draw the same conclusion that I do, that yes, climate change is a moral issue. It's an ethical issue, and it's an issue that each one of us has a responsibility to take seriously. And now for the good news of what's happening on the climate front this week. I was really excited to see Miami Beach declare a climate emergency. In essence, a climate emergency is a resolution that urges Florida, in this case, and the U.S. government to begin, quote, emergency mobilization efforts to restore a safe climate. So now there are 1,149 jurisdictions in 20 countries that represent 288 million people that are calling for climate emergency, 49 of which are in the U.S., representing 22.5 million. So that's just 6.85% here in the United States, but it's definitely a start. Thank you, Miami Beach. And then for the second good news for this week, the Weather Channel just announced today that they are planning a forum on November 7th, a primetime interview with 9 of the 2020 White House hopefuls, both Democrats and Republicans, featuring their views on climate and what we need to be doing to avert the crisis. So both of those are very good news in our world. The next up would be an action step for this week. And going back to addressing the question of, does spirituality matter in addressing climate change? I would urge you to see, what does your spiritual home say about climate change? Most religious communities have released statements on climate change and the need to care for creation. So talk with the people in your religion, at your spiritual home, in your church, or in your meditation group about the views that they have on climate change. And lastly, for a Sanity Tip of the week, express gratitude for the beauty of the natural world around you. Gratitude and keeping your focus on what's right in our world makes it easier to keep the overwhelm of what's wrong at bay. Thanks for listening this week and bearing with me as I do my thing without Christine. It's a little odd to be sitting here talking to myself, and I'm looking forward to having Christine back again and having the back and forth of our dialogue, as I'm sure you are too. Don't forget to go to earthfeelspodcast.com for show notes and links to topics discussed. See you next week. Bye-bye. That's this week's episode of Earth Feels. Special thanks to singer-songwriter Kristen Hoffman for generously allowing us to use Song for the Ocean. Thanks for listening.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Google Play so you don't miss an episode. Catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Children of the earth, I'm calling out. There's a mission for you and for me. You see, your mother, she has been suffering, and the truth is told beneath the sea.